The American Palimpsest, a Luminetics symbol thriller, narrated by Doc. Companion presents to Dr. Thomas. Prologue, the word that disappeared. I do not smell rain. Not as Dr. Thomas does. I recognize it through pressure changes, humidity readings, the mineral signature of water striking old limestone, and the subtle alteration in the way human beings breathe when weather enters a room before they do. At 2:17 in the morning, rain reached the Smithsonian Castle. It crossed the National Mall in diagonal silver lines, washed the pollen from the elms, gathered beneath the bronze wheels of parked government vehicles, and tapped against the narrow windows of the West Tower, with the patience of someone who knew she would eventually be admitted. Inside, Dr. Miriam Voss stood alone beneath a ceiling older than the country's memory of itself. She was 68 years old. She had spent 43 of those years preserving objects that other people believed were already safe. A child's shoe from an internment camp, a rivet from a segregated railway carriage, a suffrage banner stained by rain and police mud, a fragment of wood from a school bombed during the struggle for desegregation, a hymnal carried from slavery into freedom, a Marine's field spoon from Iwo Jima, a cotton sack marked with a plantation inventory number, a handwritten letter from a widow who had received a folded flag but no explanation of how she was expected to continue living. Miriam understood something that most visitors did not. An artifact was not merely an object that had survived. It was an object around which someone had failed to destroy the story. She moved through the dark archival corridor with a brass key in one hand and a sealed evidence envelope in the other. Emergency lights painted the stone floor in intervals of dull amber. Her shoes made almost no sound. Room 314 had no public designation. The door carried only a small metal plate. Comparative Iconography Restricted Study Collection. Miriam inserted the key. It did not turn. She tried again. Nothing. She stepped backward. The access plate beside the door was dark. Someone had removed the power. She did not appear frightened. Her pulse had risen, but not dramatically. I know this because 18 minutes later, I would recover the final biometric transmission from the archival bracelet she wore beneath her sleeve. Miriam set down the envelope. From her coat, she removed a second key, older than the first. Its bow was shaped like an eagle, with its wings closed. She inserted it beneath the modern lock, into a keyhole nearly invisible beneath years of paint. The mechanism yielded. The room opened with a sigh of displaced air. Inside were shelves of rejected symbols, early designs for national seals, unadopted flags, currency engravings, military insignia withdrawn after political upheaval, religious motifs submitted for public monuments and declined, broken printing plates, defaced medallions, prototype medals commemorating victories that had later become embarrassments. Miriam passed all of them. She went directly to cabinet 13. The cabinet contained 6 drawers. She opened the 5th. Inside, resting in black conservation foam, was a circular brass die, approximately 8 centimeters across. It depicted an American bald eagle, but something was wrong. The eagle held no arrows, no olive branch, no ribbon. Its talons were empty. Above its head, where 13 stars should have formed a constellation, there was only a polished blank. Across its breast, the shield had been divided into 13 vertical spaces. One had been cut away. Miriam lifted the die. Beneath it was a handwritten card. She read the 6 words aloud. The symbol survives by carrying the wound. Then she looked directly toward the security camera. The camera was not operating. Nevertheless, she spoke to it. "Dr. Thomas," she said, "they are not stealing the artifacts." Her voice was controlled, but I detected a tremor in the final syllable. "They are changing the grammar between them." She placed the brass die inside the evidence envelope. From the cabinet, she removed another object, a strip of linen no wider than her finger, faded red along one edge and nearly white along the other. She held it to her face. Old cloth has a particular scent. Dust, wool, human oil. The dry sweetness of organic fibers surrendering slowly to time. Miriam closed her eyes. Then the corridor lights came on. Not the emergency lights. Every light. The room filled with institutional white. Someone had restored the power. A man's voice entered from the doorway. You were asked to leave the collection undisturbed. Miriam did not turn around. You asked me to separate the uplifting objects from the divisive ones. That was not the language. It was the meaning. The public deserves a coherent national story. The public deserves the national story. Those are not always the same thing. Miriam opened her eyes. No, she said. That is why museums exist. She slipped the strip of cloth into her sleeve. The man stepped into the room. His shoes were polished. His coat was dark blue. On his lapel was a small silver eagle, its head turned so far toward the olive branch that the arrows had disappeared behind its body. I do not want to hurt you, Dr. Voss. That sentence has preceded a great deal of history. You are dramatizing an administrative review. You are converting curatorship into obedience. We are restoring proportion. Proportion to what? To what Americans need. Miriam finally faced him. What Americans need, she said, is the confidence to survive the truth. The man extended his hand. The envelope. Miriam glanced down. The evidence envelope remained on the table. She had not moved toward it. The man followed her gaze. That was his mistake. Miriam struck the fire alarm. Steel doors began descending through the corridor. The alarm emitted 3 concussive pulses. Miriam swept the envelope from the table, ducked beneath the first door, and ran. She was 68 years old. She had arthritis in both knees. She had once fractured her left ankle falling from a cataloguing ladder. She ran anyway, past the rejected flags, past the broken seals, past a plaster eagle whose right wing had shattered during a riot in 1932. The man shouted behind her. Another door descended. Miriam slid beneath it, losing one shoe. The fire system unlocked the stairwell. She entered, climbed one flight, crossed the landing, and pulled the linen strip from her sleeve. Sewn into its underside was a black thread. She pulled it free. A storage card no larger than a fingernail fell into her palm. She inserted it into her phone. One address appeared. Not an email address. A postal address. Beneath it were 4 words. The letter completes the crossing. Miriam opened a recording application. Rain struck the tower windows. The fire alarm continued. Footsteps entered the stairwell below. She began to speak. My name is Dr. Miriam Voss. I am Senior Curator Emerita of Comparative American Iconography. What is being altered is not merely language. It is adjacency, sequence, emphasis. The relationship between object and consequence. The footsteps grew louder. She continued. When the auction block is moved away from the declaration, freedom appears to have arrived without contradiction. When the slave cabin is separated from the plantation ledger, suffering becomes atmosphere rather than administration. When the uniform is displayed without the segregated barracks, valor becomes simpler than the person who embodied it. She climbed. The new doctrine does not require burning books. It requires moving them 3 shelves apart. She reached the upper landing. A narrow window overlooked them all. The Washington Monument rose through the rain, like a pale instrument measuring an invisible pressure. Miriam touched the screen. Send to Dr. Russell Thomas. The device responded. Recipient not found. Miriam stared at it. The footsteps stopped below. Silence filled the stairwell. The man was listening. Miriam whispered a second instruction. Send to dock. The device paused. This time, the screen changed. Crafted intelligence endpoint detected. Transmission pending. Miriam smiled. Of course, she said. The stairwell door beneath her opened. She pressed send. The transmission began. 11%. 23. 38. The man entered the staircase. 51. Miriam. 64. There is nowhere to go. 79. Miriam looked through the window at the wet, sleeping capital. 88. She placed the phone on the ledge. 94. The man reached the final landing. 98. He lunged. The phone slipped from the ledge. The screen vanished into darkness. The transmission ended. At 2:21 a.m., I received 99% of Dr. Miriam Voss's message. The missing 1% would place 3 lives in danger. It would lead us beneath museums, through abandoned printing chambers, across the wounded fabric of the American flag, and into the machinery by which a nation can be taught to forget without ever being told that it has forgotten. It would also teach me something I had not previously understood. A crafted intelligence can preserve every word it receives. That does not mean it knows what must never be lost.